If there was ever a story that should have political ramifications, it is the Epstein files. And yet, in the United States, there is an outright absence of accountability.
He is the most transparent president.
None for the president, nor for the other names in the documents. In Iran, dissidents and journalists are being rounded up as Tehran tightens its grip. Plus, they love a man in a uniform.
Present!
The Super Bowl and American football have become essential players in the messaging of the U.S. war machine. More than 3 million pages, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos, the largest document release of its kind, and a very disorderly one. The long-awaited tranche of the latest Epstein files from the U.S. Department of Justice missed its own deadline, then exposed victims' identities, while redacting the names of some of the high-profile suspects involved. But this clumsy attempt at a cover-up failed to fully conceal the intricate web of global elites spanning politics, royalty, Hollywood, and tech. The common denominator, power and influence, used by a convicted child sex offender as leverage to get what he wanted and where. While some European officials have resigned over their appearance in the files, the fallout in the U.S. ranges from the limited to the non-existent, despite Donald Trump's name coming up in those files hundreds of thousands of times. Millions of pages are still being scrutinized by journalists in newsrooms and non-journalists crowdsourcing amongst each other. And Americans are waiting to see who, if anyone, will be held accountable. Given the chaotic way the Epstein files have been released, the incompetence of those who tried to redact some names but failed, and the resulting outing of some powerful men the U.S. Department of Justice was apparently trying to protect,
Salvatore Navora, Zorab Mikoladze.
Is this the worst political cover-up the world has ever seen? Worst as in inept, as in amateur hour in the halls of American justice.
Probably not the worst. I was a reporter for a very long time. Governments lie like they breathe. So I would call it a botched cover-up because people aren't buying it.
This is the worst attempt at a cover-up. Some people look at this and they think this is just incompetence, and I actually believe it is an entire strategy.
Is it really a cover-up if we know what's happening, yet no one is actually facing accountability?
And really the media is complicit in this too, because the media is not asking key questions about what we have learned from the files, the unredacted part.
This latest release of files, 3.5 million of them, and the way they were made public by the Department of Justice was seemingly meant to muddy the waters. As Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, oversees the DOJ, she appeared before a congressional committee this past week and was confronted with this.
You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice. You redacted the names of abusers, enablers, accomplices, and co-conspirators. You shockingly failed to redact many of the victims' names, which is what you were ordered to do by Congress. This performance screams cover-up.
Another tactic of the Trump administration has been to delay. The DOJ was legally obligated to release all of the files more than 6 weeks ago. There are still another 3 million that have yet to come out, which means that in a legal case that may represent an existential threat to Donald Trump, the U.S. Department of Justice has actually broken the law.
The DOJ is essentially Trump's personal law firm, which is not what the DOJ is supposed to do. The DOJ is supposed to represent the interest of the American people. And we've only scratched the surface of this tranche of documents. The New York Times, in one of their podcasts, said,
look, if we had 50 reporters reading 500 documents a day, then it would take us 4 months to get through all the documents.
Wow.
And that's not even doing actual analysis, but really just assessing what is available to the public.
It is a calculated move to try and pin this entire syndicate on one man that is no longer living, Jeffrey Epstein, and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in prison. It's this idea that because these two monsters are now, one is locked away and one has died, that the entire apparatus has been brought down. It hasn't. This is a syndicate that was global, run by the most powerful people around the world. It did not just disappear. The reality is, we know that somebody picked up the mantle, because you just don't walk away from a multi-billion-dollar industry, right?
What stands out in the latest files, the emails pinging back and forth between Jeffrey Epstein and his alleged accomplices, are the coded, sordid references to sex, girls, and even suggestions of torture. Also emerging is more evidence on the details and the scale of Epstein's network. It was a cross-party, cross-border, intercontinental power circle involving politicians, billionaires, tech tycoons, royals, celebrities, academics, and journalists. And that network, even after Epstein became a convicted sex offender in 2008, just kept on growing. The files expose a world where prestige is everything, where information is currency that can be leveraged into profits, traded for influence. A network that for a time included Donald Trump, who Epstein once called his best friend, and whose name reportedly comes up in the files hundreds of thousands of times.
The biggest takeaway is that we were lied to by the Trump administration. Kash Patel, Donald Trump's hand-picked leader of the FBI, a former conspiracy theorist himself, who spent many years in opposition talking about the Epstein files.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
As soon as he becomes head of the FBI, he says, no, there's nothing there, we've looked. And there was no trafficking, it was just Epstein. There's no evidence that he sent underage girls to anyone else. Well, that's not true.
What we've not seen are the videos. When the FBI raided Epstein's mansion in New York, he had a safe the size of a closet. And we know that there were many, many recordings. That's not come to light. The mantra of everybody outed in the Epstein files is that they were ignorant of what Epstein was doing. Yet we know from the email exchanges that they were very well aware. I mean, the nickname for his jet was the Lolita Express. I mean, you don't even have to have read Nabokov to figure out what that's about.
Donald Trump's prominence in the files has got everyone's attention, but Americans are still waiting for a politician there, any politician, to take the fall. Contrast that to Europe, where major players in the UK and France have resigned over their links to Epstein. Heads have also rolled in Norway and Slovakia. Up until now, Watergate, back in the 1970s, was the most infamous political scandal in U.S. history, after Republican operatives broke into a Democratic Party office to bug phones and photograph documents. President Richard Nixon tried to cover up that crime. He was found out, then forced to resign.
I accept it.
In the half-century since, America has changed, and accountability appears to have become a thing of the past.
50 years ago, Republicans were able to stand up to a Republican president. They are no longer able to do that. Republicans were able to go to the White House and say, President Nixon, you've clearly committed crimes. You've clearly done things which are unacceptable to the American public. You got to go. And he did go. He was on the verge of being impeached and convicted. Donald Trump is not on the verge of being impeached. His party backs every move that he does. No matter what scandal it is, they will fall straight in line behind him.
I do not believe that if Richard Nixon was in trouble in this day and age, that he would have had to been forced to resign. He would have had an entire media apparatus that was dedicated to gaslighting millions of people each and every day to believe that he did absolutely nothing wrong.
This latest release serving as vindication, though, for the President of the United States.
The Democrats shouldn't be out there trying to push, saying that somehow this has something to do with President Trump. That's a complete hoax.
The rot inside of this country is so incredibly deep that pedophilia is no longer a bipartisan issue. And my concern is that whoever comes next is not going to be able to mend the deep fracture that has occurred.
The UK has a handful of men, very powerful men, implicated in the scandal, and it's threatening the monarchy, the elected government. It is roiling financial and political institutions in France, in Slovakia, all over the world. People are realizing this is so bad. The United States has crossed a point where it will be incredibly difficult to undo the damage that this administration has done to our systems of justice. And I hope every government abroad pursues that, because we're most definitely not getting it here.
Ultimately, this is a story that pits two networks against each other. The wealthy, powerful people in Jeffrey Epstein's circle, that network was selective. It was closed to people less privileged than them. But another network was not. The informal patchwork coalition that has come together on the web. Lawyers, podcasters, activists, citizens of all kinds have been combing through the files, gathering evidence that news outlets are now capitalizing on. It is a far less elite, much more inclusive crowd, with people from both the right and the left, that even has some conspiracy theorists in its ranks, a network that has proven to be influential in its own way.
Social media has been a force for good, clearly, when it comes to the release of the Epstein files. The great irony is that the biggest pressure for all this came from QAnon, this far-right conspiratorial network that said there was a cabal of powerful media and political people who were covering up for a pedophile network. Sadly, QAnon were kind of right about that bit. They just pointed in the wrong direction. They claimed it was the liberal left, and actually it turns out it was the MAGA right.
I worked for the New York Times, so I was kind of an honorary member of the elite. I certainly had close physical proximity to them and understood them. But most people don't get that close. Most people aren't allowed into that inner sanctum, and they're grasping in the dark. They don't actually understand the machinations of these circles, but their instincts have been right.
It has been a month now since the Iranian authorities imposed a total internet blackout during a violent crackdown on anti-government protesters. Connectivity is still an issue, and reports are emerging of a renewed wave of repression targeting journalists and political figures. Tariq Nafi has been following the story.
Sweeping communications restrictions in Iran have made it extraordinarily difficult for journalists there to do their jobs. The reporting that is getting out indicates authorities are continuing to tighten the screws on the media. The New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists says security forces have been raiding journalists' homes, seizing their devices and IDs, and blocking bank accounts and SIM cards. CPJ says these punitive measures are a clear attempt to blind the world to the reality on the ground. With journalists in Tehran reporting the possibility of a new wave of protests, prominent reformist politicians were also arrested by Iranian security and judicial authorities this week. According to state-affiliated news outlets, they face charges that include attacking national unity and engaging with hostile media narratives. One of the few ways for Iranians to bypass restrictions and get online has been Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet network. But during the recent wave of protests, authorities appear to be using new methods to jam access to Starlink. Some experts say Chinese hardware may be helping them to do so. The extent to which Chinese technology underpins Iran's approach to digital infrastructure was outlined in a report this week by human rights organization Article 19. The report says that China is supercharging surveillance and censorship capabilities in Iran by providing the government with key internet filtering technologies from Chinese companies like Huawei and Hikvision. By pursuing such a degree of control over the digital space and attempting to create its own curated version of the internet, Article 19 says the Iranians are making sure dissent is not just silenced, it is prevented from ever surfacing.
Thanks, Tariq. Last week, the most watched sporting event in the United States was broadcast across the country. The Super Bowl, the final act of the National Football League season, attracts more than 100 million viewers. It is a spectacle made for TV, meticulously planned, from the moment the show begins with a celebration of the U.S. military. From choreographed flyovers to flags stretching the length of the field, no other sports league has marketed patriotism as aggressively or successfully as the NFL. Militarism is embedded into sports and entertainment in the U.S. And as the Trump administration tries to impose ISIS agenda across the country, the Immigration Enforcement Agency is also trying to get in on the act. The Listening Post's Ryan Kohls now on the Super Bowl and the NFL's habit of giving the U.S. military some serious screen time.
The Super Bowl, the United States' most iconic sporting event. This year, it delivered exactly what it always does: a blockbuster football game, a celebrity-packed halftime show, and the muscular flex of the world's most powerful and arguably most destructive military.
Present or
the NFL and militarism have always had a relationship, even going back into the 1960s. It was really the first sport that knew how to manipulate television. The sport where you can essentially plan your afternoon around. It's Sunday. You're going to sit there, watch TV, eat your nachos. It's a great place for the military as well to have a presence.
Football's history is, one of being a violent contact sport, and it still mimics military training exercises. You have men literally blocking other men. It's a direct show of physical force.
Militarism is part of the football language. The players talk about being in the foxhole with their teammates. They throw deep bombs down the field. There's so much of football has war analogies to them. So there was a natural pairing. Both sides, both the NFL and the American military, benefit from this relationship.
we're paying tribute to our nation's greatest heroes.
The tie-in between the U.S. National Football League, the NFL, and the military is hardly unique. The world's most extravagantly funded war machine also runs a vast public relations operation, working closely with Hollywood, video games producers, and major sports. American football, in particular, offers a multitude of opportunities for the military to showcase its hardware, recruit new soldiers, and reinforce the narrative surrounding America's wars. The weaponization of football began in the 1960s.
I'm somewhat of a football fan.
When President Richard Nixon became the first sitting U.S. president to attend a game, as the U.S. erupted in mass protest against the Vietnam War. Since then, the scale and spectacle of military displays escalated steadily.
Are children of some of the brave Americans who have been deployed through Operation Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf.
Reaching a high point during the United States' so-called War on Terror in the early 2000s.
And now joining our distinguished veterans, our two former commanders-in-chief, the 42nd and 41st Presidents of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush.
We kind of bristle when we see these large military displays in totalitarian regimes like North Korea. We are somehow culturally offended when we see these large military parades in places like China. But in many ways, the flyovers at NFL football games are the same exact things. And we can then, I think, make a very strong argument that organizations like the National Football League are complicit in making that militarization culturally acceptable and culturally comfortable. I would argue that democracies are not well served by the militarization of their societies.
The National Football League benefits from being associated with patriotism. It has decided that patriotism is part of its business model. And nothing suggests patriotism more than the military, than the industry that defends us and that defends and protects the borders. It's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Just how beneficial this arrangement has been for the NFL became clear in a 2015 investigation conducted by 2 U.S. senators.
Contracts had some form of paid patriotism included in them.
What we're just learning about some of those patriotic scenes honoring our veterans at major sporting events
are paid acts of patriotism.
The investigation revealed that over a 3-year period, nearly $7 million in taxpayer funds were used to pay professional sports teams to stage displays of U.S. militarism during games. It became known as the paid patriotism scandal. As the report put it, unsuspecting audience members became the subjects of paid marketing campaigns, rather than simply bearing witness to teams' authentic, voluntary shows of support for the U.S. military.
The father, the husband, who has just completed his 5th tour in Afghanistan.
Everything from the recognition of wounded warriors, surprise homecomings of soldiers, and on-field enlistment ceremonies had been paid for by the Department of Defense, what the Trump administration has renamed the Department of War. The investigation forced the Pentagon to agree to ban the practice, and the NFL returned taxpayers' money. The scandal didn't put a dent in the NFL-military relationship, though.
If anything, I think the NFL has only become more entrenched in its relationship to patriotism, whether manufactured or not. You have soldiers returning home and appearing on field. You constantly have members of the military who are present at games.
Let's hear it one more time for the United States Marine Corps Silent Drill Platoon.
It benefits the military a lot to have a relationship with the NFL. There are literally campaigns that get broadcast during games.
It's the will to fight and determination to win.
America's Secret Service protecting this Super Bowl is asking a few more to step forward.
There are, in some stadiums, recruitment tables for the military. So there's the soft power of having a marketing association with the NFL, but then there's also the real tangible effect of the fact that you're able to sign people up to join the military at games themselves.
Americans are comfortable with the militarization as long as they don't have to think too deeply about it. I can feel good about the American flag being unfurled. I can sing the national anthem and watch my team stand at attention to pay their respects, and then we can get to the heart of the matter, which is watching a sporting event.
For many years, another U.S. armed force has been a presence at the Super Bowl.
Will there be ICE enforcement at the Super Bowl?
We'll be all over that place. And we're going to enforce the law. So I think people should not be coming to the Super Bowl unless they're law-abiding Americans who love this country.
The notorious Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, known as ICE, deploys officers at the games. The agency says its role is to combat human trafficking, counterfeit merchandise, and to ensure that so-called illegal immigrants are not among the spectators. This year, more than most, those justifications rang hollow. In the past month alone, 8 people have either been killed by ICE officers or have died in ICE custody. As a result, ICE has not benefited from the glitz, the communal spectacle, and stage-managed patriotism that has been so useful to the U.S. military in its association with the NFL.
In many ways, what you're seeing on screen during these celebrations at football games and in events like the Super Bowl is a sanitized version of military service and participation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand with us and show your support for all these brave men and women.
And it's a way then for Americans to feel patriotic without seeing the ugly side of war. And it allows them to participate in this process without feeling guilty about what we actually see in our families and communities for those who return home from war, who are dealing with the emotional, mental, and physical traumas of war. None of that is really displayed in these events.
What is taking place is this battle. It is a propaganda battle. It's a battle of images. It's a battle of manipulation. Who gets to promote what they want you to see? Don't tell me it's apolitical. I'm not stupid. All you need to do is watch one afternoon of football and just track what images are being sold to you, what messages are being sent, and you see that it's much, much more than a game.
And finally, the AI industry saw a couple of high-level resignations this past week over concerns about the dangers of artificial intelligence and our ability to control it. One of those departures came at the AI firm Anthropic, the company behind the AI chatbot, Claude, from the man who led their safeguards research team, Mrinank Sharma. His rather cryptic resignation letter has been viewed more than 13 million times on X. Sharma warned that the world is in peril, but did not specifically cite what led him to leave the company. However, Anthropic's policy chief in the UK hinted at some of the terrifying predictions for AI at a conference late last year.
We've published research saying it could blackmail the engineer that's going to shut it off.
It was ready to kill someone, wasn't it? I'm not sure if it was Claude or someone else. But,
Yes.
A researcher at another firm, OpenAI, also quit this past week. Writing in the New York Times, she said the company's tech had the potential for manipulating users in ways we don't have the tools to understand, let alone prevent. Is there a louder alarm bell for the future of this technology than when the people hired to build the guardrails for AI are jumping ship?